The morning began like any other in Washington as the sky over the Capitol was the color of cold steel. Reporters swarmed the marble steps, and senators streamed into the chamber for what was supposed to be a routine session. But beneath the calm surface, tension rippled like an unseen current. Everyone knew the topic of the day wasn't just another debate. It was about the Gaza peace deal and who, if anyone, deserved the credit. Inside the Senate, the air was thick with anticipation. Aides whispered, journalists prepared their recorders, and political staffers lined the upper gallery. At the center of the chamber stood Senator Elizabeth Warren, her signature crimson jacket blazing under the lights, her expression unyielding. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at her notes, and began with the calm precision that had once made her a professor. Peace, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, is not a partisan trophy to be claimed by any administration. It is the product of diplomacy, humanity, and courage, not ego. A soft murmur of approval rose from the Democratic side of the chamber. Let me be clear, she continued, her tone sharpening. The recent ceasefire between Israel and Gaza is the result of tireless efforts by international mediators and our diplomatic corps, not the so-called groundwork laid by an administration that sowed chaos around the world. Everyone knew who she meant. She didn't have to say the name. Her words echoed off the walls, and for a moment, all was still. Then, from across the aisle, JD Vance rose slowly. The Republican senator from Ohio had a reputation as blunt, fearless, and sharp as a knife. His speechwriter once joked that Vance didn't need talking points, he was the talking point. Dressed in a dark navy suit, his expression unreadable, he stepped toward the microphone. Madam Senator, he began, his voice calm, steady, and almost too polite. I listened carefully to your remarks, and, as always, they sound elegant on paper. But I have to ask, do you really believe peace just happened, out of nowhere? A flicker of irritation crossed Warren's face. I believe peace comes from diplomacy, she replied, not deals made for photo ops. Vance smiled faintly. Diplomacy, yes, but where did those diplomatic channels come from? You talk about the Gaza Peace Deal as if it materialized overnight. But those conversations started years ago, under an administration you've spent half your career attacking. The chamber fell silent. Even senators checking their phones looked up. Let's talk about facts, Vance continued, pacing slightly as he spoke. In 2020, under President Trump, the Abraham Accords opened doors between Israel and several Arab nations, doors that had been shut for half a century. That framework created the trust, the mechanisms, and the precedent that made this Gaza agreement possible. He leaned forward, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. You can dislike the man, Senator Warren. You can disagree with his tweets, his personality, even his hair, but you don't get to rewrite history because you don't like who signed the paper. Gasps rippled through the room. The camera shutters clicked furiously from the press gallery above. Warren's eyes narrowed. Rewriting history? She shot back. You mean the history where that same administration alienated our allies, banned refugees, and pulled out of treaties that held the world together? History, Vance said, his voice rising, where America stopped apologizing for defending its interests, where, for the first time in decades, Middle Eastern nations began to see peace not as an illusion, but as a possibility. Applause broke out from the Republican side. Even a few moderates on the Democratic benches looked uneasy. Warren straightened her back. Senator Vance, I find it deeply troubling that you're giving credit to a man who undermined democratic norms at home while pretending to build peace abroad. And I find it troubling, Vance countered, that you can't bring yourself to admit when something worked just because it came from the other side of the aisle. That's not integrity, that's arrogance. The air in the chamber grew heavier. Warren clenched her jaw. This deal belongs to the diplomats, the negotiators, the international partners. No, Vance interrupted, his voice now firm and resonant. It belongs to the courage to try something new, to stop treating the Middle East like a museum of failure. The Trump administration did that, and whether you like it or not, that's the reason a ceasefire exists today. The sound of murmuring turned into a low roar. Aides rushed to whisper to their senators. Reporters typed furiously, sensing the story unfolding before them. Warren gripped the edge of her desk. Courage? You call reckless deals and personal vanity courage? I call results courage, Vance shot back. And the result is that for the first time in years, missiles have stopped falling on children's homes. You can stand here and philosophize, Senator, but the facts are simple. Trump's groundwork made this possible. Warren's temper flared. You are twisting reality, Senator Vance. No one denies peace is good, but you are giving credit to a man who divided our country, incited violence, and nearly tore apart the Constitution. And yet, Vance said softly, he still got results that career politicians could only dream of. Maybe that's why it bothers you so much. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the stenographer paused mid-sentence. Cameras zoomed in on Warren's face, a flash of disbelief, then anger, then something she couldn't quite hide. Hesitation. JD Vance turned toward the crowd of senators, his tone measured again. You see, colleagues, the problem isn't about Trump or Biden or any administration. It's about truth. And the truth is, the path to this peace started when America decided to lead, not lecture. A smattering of applause began. Hesitant at first, then louder as others joined in. Warren tried to regain control. This isn't about partisanship, but it is about honesty. Vance interjected, and honesty means giving credit where it's due. You talk about equality, fairness, and transparency, but when peace happens under a man you despise, suddenly it's everyone's work but his. That's not fairness, that's selective morality. Warren opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The camera zoomed closer. Vance's voice dropped lower, almost gentle now. You once said, "A truth matters." I agree, so let's start with that. He gathered his papers, adjusted his tie, and looked directly at Warren. You don't have to like Trump, Senator, but pretending his administration's groundwork didn't lead to this moment, that's not truth. That's pride. With that, he turned and walked back to his seat. The echo of his footsteps filled the silence. The entire Senate seemed frozen at a kind of stillness that follows something historic. In the gallery, reporters exchanged stunned glances. One whispered, "That's the clip that's going viral tonight." And indeed, within minutes, it did. Clips of the exchange flooded social media. JD Vance destroys Warren on live TV. Warren left speechless over Gaza deal credit. Truth bombs in the Senate. Millions watched as Warren stood behind her desk, papers trembling slightly in her hands, her eyes distant. For the first time in years, the woman known for her fiery comebacks had no retort. Across the chamber, JD Vance sat down calmly, leaned back in his chair, and whispered to an aide, "That wasn't about her. That was about truth." And yet, deep down, even he knew the battle had only begun. Because in politics, truth didn't just make enemies, it made headlines. The clip of JD Vance's confrontation with Elizabeth Warren had barely finished airing before it spread like wildfire across every corner of the internet. Within hours, hashtags flooded social media. #Vance versus Warren, #Truth in the Senate, #Gaza deal shock. The 25-second exchange, Warren's indignant glare and Vance's quiet, devastating line about truth versus pride day, was already being called the political moment of the year. Inside the Capitol, chaos reigned. Every network had cameras stationed outside Warren's office. Her aides rushed through the corridors, docking microphones and avoiding reporters' questions. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC all running live coverage, each spinning the clash differently. For her part, Warren sat in silence behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed endlessly, calls from donors, the DNC, even a few old colleagues from Harvard. On her desk lay a printed transcript of her exchange with Vance, every line highlighted, annotated, dissected. Her communications director, Melissa, paced nervously. "Senator, we need the response, something strong. You can't let Vance frame this as you refusing to acknowledge peace." Warren's fingers tapped the desk slowly. He twisted the facts. He used the peace deal to glorify Trump. "That's not truth, it's theater." Melissa sighed. "Yes, but it worked. Everyone saw him as a calm voice of reason." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Emotional, defensive." Warren's gaze snapped up. "You think I should have just stood there and applauded Trump?" "No, Senator," Melissa said quietly, "but people don't reward anger anymore. They reward humility, especially when they've already decided someone else sounds reasonable." Warren's face hardened. Humility doesn't win power, clarity does. But that clarity was slipping away fast. Across town, JD Vance sat in a studio at Fox News, the lights reflecting off his neatly pressed suit. He looked composed, deliberate, had a picture of confidence. Tucker Carlson leaned forward with a grin. "Senator, you really rattled the chamber yesterday. Some people are calling it the moment you became the future of your party. What's your reaction?" Vance smiled faintly. "I didn't go there to embarrass anyone. I went there to tell the truth. Credit should go where it is due. Peace doesn't care about party lines." Carlson nodded approvingly. "And you think Elizabeth Warren just couldn't admit that Trump's groundwork made this Gaza deal possible?" "I think, Vance replied, "She's built her entire identity on opposing him. Admitting his success would shatter that image, so she chose pride over honesty." It was the perfect soundbite. Within minutes, it was trending across platforms. Conservative pundits hailed him as the voice of realism, while moderates called his tone refreshingly sincere. Even some progressives admitted privately that Warren had come across rigid. But then, late that night, came the bombshell that would change everything. At the State Department, a confidential press briefing was underway. Daniel Rice, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, stood before reporters with a weary expression. Before this administration could finalize the ceasefire, he began carefully, "We had to rely on existing communication networks in the region, networks established during the 2020 Abraham Accords." Murmurs filled the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Rice continued, "Those channels initiated under the Trump administration were instrumental in opening dialogue between Jerusalem, Doha, and Cairo. Without them, this deal would not have been possible." He paused, letting the words settle. "Credit belongs not just to our current team, but to the groundwork laid before us." The press corps erupted. Questions flew. "Are you saying Trump deserves credit for the Gaza Peace Deal?" one shouted. Rice simply nodded. "Partially, yes." Within 30 minutes, every major outlet had blasted the headline, "State Department confirms Trump-era channels enabled Gaza peace talks." For Warren, it was a nightmare. Her staff scrambled to contain the fallout, drafting new talking points, but nothing stuck. The narrative was already out of her control. That morning, JD Vance vindicated top trending lists worldwide. When she walked into the Capitol, the press warned her, "Senator Warren, do you still deny Trump's role in the peace deal? Senator, do you plan to apologize for your remarks yesterday? Senator, is JD Vance right about your refusal to credit the other side?" She kept her head down, muttering only, "No comment." But by evening, she had to face the cameras. CNN's primetime host, Anderson Cooper, had secured an exclusive one-on-one interview. The studio lights were dim, the tone serious. "Senator Warren," Cooper began, "you said yesterday that the Gaza peace deal was not a result of Trump's diplomacy. But today, the State Department confirmed that his administration's networks were used. Do you stand by your words?" Warren hesitated, just for a moment. But in politics, a moment was forever. "Anderson," she said finally, "peace doesn't belong to one man. It belongs to the diplomats, the negotiators, the citizens who suffer through war. What I reject is the attempt to rewrite this as a political victory for someone who has caused so much division." Cooper pressed, "So you still won't acknowledge his role?" She inhaled slowly. "I'll acknowledge every effort that helps humanity, but I won't credit chaos disguised as diplomacy." It wasn't enough. Social media exploded again, but this time, with ridicule. Clips of the interview went viral with mocking captions. "Still can't say his name." Warren versus reality. Late that night, inside her office, Warren watched the replay alone. The blue light from the television washed over her face. Each pause, each look of discomfort, each defensive word magnified, looped, analyzed. She'd fought so many battles in her career against banks, billionaires, corruption, but this one was different. This time, she wasn't the fighter, she was the target. Meanwhile, JD Vance was capitalizing on his momentum. Invitations poured in, interviews, rallies, podcasts. He'd become the face of a new conservative tone, direct, calm, fact-driven. Even some Democrats began to fear what they privately called the Vance effect. In a speech at a think tank forum days later, Vance struck again. "What happened last week wasn't about me or Senator Warren," he told a packed audience. "It was about the simple truth that leadership isn't about who gets the credit, it's about who gets the results. And for too long, Washington has forgotten that." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. The narrative was complete. Then, as if scripted by fate, Donald Trump himself finally weighed in. At a campaign stop in Florida, a reporter shouted, "Mr. President, what do you think about JD Vance's defense of your role in the Gaza peace deal?" Trump paused, grinning. "You know, JD is a smart guy, tough. He knows what everyone else knows. We did the groundwork. The world laughed when I said peace was possible. But look at them now." He shrugged theatrically. "I don't need the credit. The results speak for themselves." The crowd roared. That clip ran on every network the next day. Trump smiling, Vance vindicated, Warren silent. By the end of the week, Warren's approval among independents had dropped 10 points. Political analysts said she'd lost control of the narrative. Late-night hosts joked about her Trump allergy, and pundits began whispering the one phrase no senator wanted to hear, finished nationally. But even as she faced humiliation, Elizabeth Warren wasn't ready to give up. Late one evening, after her staff had gone home, she sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of policy drafts. Her reflection in the window looked older, wearier, yet beneath the exhaustion, a spark of determination remained. She whispered to herself, "If they think this is how my story ends a broken bar, they don't know me." Meanwhile, in Ohio, JD Vance received a call from a familiar voice. Calm, confident, unmistakably amused. "JD," Trump said, "you handled her beautifully. America needs fighters like that. Remember what I told you? Sometimes telling the truth is the loudest punch." Vance chuckled. "I didn't do it for you, sir. I did it because someone had to say it." Trump laughed softly. "Same thing, kid, same thing." And as the line went dead, JD Vance leaned back in his chair, the glow of the Capitol faint on the horizon. He wasn't just a senator anymore. He'd become a symbol of candor, conviction, and a rising political tide that even the most seasoned veteran, Elizabeth Warren, had underestimated. The Senate clash was over, but the war for truth and the credit for peace had only just begun.